intro here. So good morning, everyone. I'm Jeremy Adams, Business Development Executive for the Fulcrum Group and self-labeled Chief Help Officer. And thank you for attending today's virtual Lunch and Learn, which is the city's only educational webinar for city management and city IT teams. Our goal is to point out some concerns or problems and issues that cities and local municipalities have to remedy while keeping their users and data secure in today's cybersecurity environment. And our presentation today will identify potential solutions that these concerns and ideas to help with managing and maintaining your technology environment. So some quick housekeeping. As I said, we're going to go ahead and mute everyone. If you have a question, please type it into chat during the presentation or save it for the optional Q&A at the end of this presentation, at the end of the event. Our first presentation starts next. That's going to follow by a short break to be able to eat. And also then after, we're going to have a cybersecurity panel discussion that starts around 12:10 or so, and we'll go up to the 1 o'clock time frame where we'll immediately go into an optional audience Q&A. So our presenter today is one of Fulcrum's finest, our own Vice President, David Johnson. David's one of the co-founders of the Fulcrum Group, and he is responsible for sales and marketing strategy. He's also a cybersecurity expert and has worked with clients in several industries, including local government, healthcare, and finance. I'm also happy to announce that we have assembled a panel of your peers to have a discussion during the second half of the event to talk out ways to handle these concerns. Our panelist discussion will be led by Fulcrum's other owner and president, Steve Meek, who would say he's an old school security guy and doesn't mind explaining things. Steve's also a longtime cybersecurity expert and has maintained a CISSP certification for a number of years now. Our panel today includes Administrative Sergeant with the City of Melissa Police Department and Internal IT Director, Officer Michael Gretham, who had experience at a large corporate entity prior to becoming a police officer and currently serves as his agency's CGIS local agency security officer. We also have William Burchett, the founder of the vCISO or CISO, I think I said that right, vCISO network, an industry veteran with over 20 years with experience in many sectors, including local government, and he serves on many advisory boards and is also an active member in his local ISSA, IIA, and InfraGard chapters. We have the town manager of the town of North Lake here in the Metroplex, Drew Korn. He has also served in managerial positions in North Richland Hills and the city of Dallas, and is tasked with keeping his town's reputation as a customer service organization first and foremost, while providing quality service to all residents, visitors, and businesses. And last but not least, our own local government fractional chief information officer, Ryan Young, who gets to be the one here at Fulcrum that has to absorb all this information and help advise our clients when it comes to cybersecurity best practices, future planning with roadmaps and strategy reviews. So aside from David and Steve and fractional CIO Ryan Young, our Fulcrum Group members present today are professional service manager David Atchley, Chase Haley, our procurement specialist who handles all things hardware, subscriptions, and licensing, Amy Edwards, our IT operations assistant, and Laura James, our marketing coordinator. And lastly, before we get started, I wanted to add that I had a hand in getting everyone here today as promised, and this is meant to be an educational event for you to potentially verify everything you're currently doing, but also maybe identify potential gaps where security is concerned or bring up topics not previously discussed in detail with your management teams. So should any of the solutions presented today create a question for you, or if you'd like a better understanding or more specific explanation as it pertains to your city's environment, please feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to jump on a call or on Teams for a quick 15 to 20 minutes to help out, even if that means nothing for Fulcrum moving forward. So if there's any questions, feel free to share in chat. And if you wanted to mute everyone, David, and without further ado, take it away, David.
All right, let me see, how do we do the muting? I guess I got to hit people, mute all. All right, everybody hear me okay? Just wave if you can hear me. All right, awesome. Hit my share button. And everybody see my screen okay? All right. Let's see, looks like Jeremy had one more attendee. You got him? Okay. All right. Let's get my notes up and then we're good to go. All right. Thanks everybody for being here this morning. I'm David Johnson, VP of Sales and Marketing here at the Fulcrum Group. Today, we're going to talk about, in my presentation, about the top 5 cybersecurity concerns for city managers. And I'm going to hopefully give you some tips on how to mitigate those risks, how to have conversations between IT and leadership, and really try to figure out what's next, how to get how to get more secure. So a little bit about of our agenda today. First off, we'll give you just a real quick background of Fulcrum and our cybersecurity expertise. And then we're going to talk about what's at risk for local government agencies. And there's a lot. And then we're going to talk about those top 5 cybersecurity concerns for city managers. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the best practices with a special emphasis on public safety. And then we'll have some Q&A at the end. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. So just real quickly here at Fulcrum, we like to think of ourselves as what we refer to as a technology success partner. Over the years, we've worked with a lot of government agencies and other public sector organizations. And we have a specific focus on cybersecurity. So, in other words, this ain't our first rodeo. So, uh, in the chat, if you don't mind, please let me know what your role is in the organization and the name of your organization, just so we kind of get a feel for who everybody is. So, all right. So, let's talk about what's at risk. So I'm not going to sit here today and regale you with all of the horror stories of cyber attacks against government agencies. We've all seen the different things that have happened over the last few years in the press. Instead, I'm going to focus more on the risk, kind of the top threats, the top concerns, and what you can do about it. So, when it comes to local government agencies, cybersecurity risk has really increased at an exponential amount over the past few years. So, one of the things that we've learned is that cyber criminals know that they can operate nearly without impunity or threat of being caught. The laws just have not caught up, and there's a lot of financial risk for local government. Uh, if you have a breach, the technology updates that you have to do, possible legal fees, breach notification costs, uh, recovering systems, any kind of forensic investigations that have to be done, and other costs. It's not uncommon for a breach to cost $100,000 or more, and that's not even including a possible ransom fee. So, uh, in addition, we're finding that cyber criminals are increasingly targeting government agencies for financial gain, as financially motivated attacks knock social engineering out of the top three threats for the public sector. Starting with data and applications, public safety has the most data, especially when you add in body cam footage, which also happens to be the most sensitive data. Courts and utilities represent huge revenue sources for local government. So when those systems are down, revenue, collection is halted. And depending on how the recovery goes, there could be more than just delays in collecting revenue. There could be complete revenue losses if the records of those transactions are lost. Becoming a victim of a cyber attack can also result in a loss of reputation or even a loss of the public's confidence in the local government agency's leadership, especially if data and systems can't be recovered quickly. Cyber attacks put jobs at risk. City managers, police chiefs, IT managers have been fired over cyber attacks in the past. Another area of high risk is utilities and critical infrastructure. Imagine if water, gas, or electricity can't be delivered safely to residents because of a cyber attack. There have been several well-publicized critical infrastructure attacks over the past year, and these risks continue to increase. Technologies such as IoT, which are awesome because they make managing critical infrastructure more efficient, but these technologies can also become attack vectors for cyber criminals. Now let's take a look at our top 5 cybersecurity concerns. Local government agencies have data, lots of it, right? And unlike the past, cyber criminals are no longer satisfied with just encrypting your data via ransomware. They're a lot more patient today. They gain access to your data through one of these 4 key paths that we're going to talk about. Then they study your data, they may exfiltrate your data, and they might even use your data against you. In a cyber attack against the Washington, D.C. Metro Police last year, cyber criminals claimed to have stolen more than 250 gig of data, and they ended up releasing sensitive information on 22 police officers, including fingerprints, dates of birth, polygraph test results, and financial history. And this was all done in an attempt to increase the amount of the ransom to be paid. One of the annual reports that we like to look at for the cybersecurity world is the Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report. And in the most recent report, researchers identified the 4 key paths to your data. In other words, the most common ways that cyber attackers gain access to your data. First up on that list is credentials. That's usernames and passwords. Credentials continue to be harvested and stolen from users through social engineering and through website user database breaches. So when those websites are compromised and their user databases are breached, those list of credentials are being dumped into the dark web for cyber criminals to use. With phishing, the types and sophistication of phishing emails being delivered to users continues to increase. It's really critical that users receive regular training on how to avoid phishing attempts. Another area that's been increasing over the past few years is exploiting vulnerabilities. And these are systems that are unpatched along with zero-day threats. And these are leading to an increasing attack vector for cyber criminals. And then the final one on the list is botnets. While botnets are less effective than in years past, they can still cause plenty of damage through distributed denial of service attacks that can cause congestion on your internet connections and make it nearly impossible to do business. All right, we're going to get to number 2 on our list, ransomware. There's probably people out there that say it should be number 1 on this list, but you know, if you can block those 4 paths to your data, you'll significantly reduce your ransomware risk. But until that's done, ransomware is still a major concern. The latest Verizon DBIR report details how the increase in ransomware attacks in 2021 was as big as the last 5 years combined. And it's important to remember that ransomware is just a business model, and it's just where access to your data is being monetized. One big change in ransomware for 2021 was the fact that supply chain breaches became a huge threat to businesses and organizations all over the world. When cyber criminals can compromise a key vendor in the middle of a supply chain, that can lead to ransomware attacks up and down the supply chain. One other big trend, and this started back in 2020, is what's referred to as the double extortion strategy of ransomware. And double extortion ransomware is a multi-stage ransomware attack that combines traditional encryption of the victim's files with the exfiltration of their data outside of the organization to attacker-controlled servers. The attacker then proves to the victim it has access to the sensitive data and threatens to release the breach data publicly unless the ransom payment is paid within the designated time frame. This puts additional pressure on victims to meet the attacker's demands on their timeline, as well as exposes the victim to potential penalties from data protection regulators. To strengthen the double extortion, most of the ransomware gangs establish shame blogs where they post the names and, in some cases, the data of victims who are not willing to pay the ransom. Now let's take a look at number 3. And this is another one that you could make a case for that this should be the number 1 on the list, the human element. People continue to play a huge role in cyber attacks, with 82% of breaches involving the human element. Social engineering continues to be an area where users are susceptible. The oldie but goodie, pick up the phone, call one of your users and say, "Hi, I'm from your IT department, and I need your username and password." It still works and is incredibly effective. And when social engineering is used, it's almost always motivated by financial gain. Another area is misconfiguration, and this is typically misconfigured servers and other systems that are accidentally exposed to the internet. They might include things like default credentials, and that represents 13% of total breaches. And then the last one is really a huge part of your people, and that's the privileged misuse of privileged misuse of credentials, and those are driving cybersecurity incidents up significantly. And these are typically unapproved use of credentials or malicious use of credentials and legitimate privileges. And it's important to note that one of these incidents, when they happen, they almost always result in actual data breaches. So it's a very successful attack if you have an insider who's using privileged credentials and capabilities. All right, number 4 on the list. This is something that probably should be really near and dear the heart to both city managers and IT managers. So we call it missing the basics. And so we start out at that top level, right? And we've had a lot of conversations over the last few years with local government leaders, and we've heard a common refrain that cybersecurity is the responsibility of IT. And we really feel like this is a dangerous mindset, as cybersecurity efforts have the most success when local government leadership leads the charge. The good news is we're starting to see a changing trend in that, and thanks to all of you guys for being here, showing us that you believe in that. Uh, and that change is because of the increasing risk. Next up is internal IT, and it's when we look at internal IT, it's not really fair to look for them to be cybersecurity experts, right? So a local government agency typically has one IT person for every 40 to 60 employees, sometimes even higher employee to IT person counts. And in the world of day-to-day IT operations, there are a lot of hats to wear, right? They've got to be end user support. They got to manage the network infrastructure. They've got to manage third-party IT vendors. They've got to handle, the platform stuff like backups and patching and endpoint protection and all of those kind of things. They also have to be involved in budgeting and planning, and there are probably other roles as well, right? And that's all before you even get to cybersecurity. One of the things that we've heard from IT managers and their team over and over again is that they're wearing a lot of hats, they're being overworked, and it makes it difficult to develop cybersecurity skills. The next thing up on the list is kind of the third-party outsourcing and managed IT companies, or MSPs. They may be moderately better equipped to handle cybersecurity, but typically we've seen that most managed IT outsourcing contracts only include what I would typically refer to as basic cybersecurity. So they're handling the Windows patching, they're managing the endpoint protection, maybe they're reviewing user permissions on the network, but more comprehensive cybersecurity solutions typically aren't included unless you pay more. So just kind of be aware of that. And then when it comes to your actual cybersecurity, your end users are still your greatest weakness. So uh, getting the phishing attacks, the social engineering attacks, the compromised credentials on the dark web, data leakage, those are just a few of the threats facing end users. And many local government agencies, we find, still don't require their end users to take the annual security awareness training or subject them to email phishing simulations or provide and enforce the proper cybersecurity policies and procedures. The best cybersecurity in the world can be defeated by an end user clicking on a phishing email. And then, of course, it's hard to know what your cybersecurity needs are until you've completed a baseline risk assessment. A baseline risk assessment just basically tells you where you're at this point in time, so that you have a starting point, and then you're going to build your cybersecurity plan from there. And then, of course, we always make sure that you're building out some IT policies, some cybersecurity policies, and incident response plans. So that way, if you do have a cybersecurity incident, you'll have a plan with how to respond. And then one thing that we commonly see for internal IT for local government is that they rarely have the tools implemented for what we refer to as automated IT inventory. And a basic tenet of cybersecurity is that you can only secure what you know about. So having a automated IT inventories can help your IT team spend more time driving the organization forward instead of tracking laptop inventory in a spreadsheet. And then finally, I think we've reached that day now where MFA is no longer considered advanced cybersecurity. It's part of the basics. Um, and if you haven't done it, now's the time to get it done. And it's the single thing that you can do to improve your cybersecurity posture the most. Here's number 5 on our list, and that's a lack of protection for Office 365. So, one of the things that I've learned is that Microsoft Office 365 is now a critical communications tool for government agencies. They have their email there. They're using Teams. They're moving their file shares to SharePoint. And I've heard some local government agencies say that it is the most important system they have. So my question to you is, when's the last time you did a cybersecurity review of your tenant, or reviewed your licensing? What kind of monitoring do you have in place for critical items such as forwarding rules or logins from outside the country? Those are things that people are not necessarily looking at. All right, so I've given you the top 5 lists, but I was going at this presentation and everything, and I felt like there was some bonus information. So I'm throwing in a couple of extras here, and so this is for all of my CGIS folks out there, uh, and that's failing to meet compliance requirements, right? So MFA is a big one. There are a lot of things inside of the CGIS requirements that are there. One of the big ones is, knowing whether or not your firewall is FIPS certified. That's a big one. Uh, And another one that we find with local government, generally on the town or city side, the administrative side, is that there may not be a compliant email archiving system for open records. So make sure you take a look at what you're doing there. If you haven't done that, ask your IT if you don't know, but you want to make sure that you have that. Other things are using whole disk encryption on laptops and mobile devices so that they're lost or stolen. Uh, those devices, the data can't be compromised on them. And then, like I said, keeping going, so I came up with one more. So we ended up with 7 instead of 5. So and so our last one on the list here uh, is about backups, right? Backups and disaster recovery. Um, we've seen quite a few scenarios where the city leadership hasn't had a lot of discussions with IT about the organization's requirements for the two big things, what we call recovery time objective. In other words, if there's a system failure, how long can afford to be down? And then the recovery point objective, how much data can you afford to lose? We also see especially when we bring on a new client, we found out their backup systems are not even backing up all of their current servers and data as it is. And then we also find that Office 365 data is not regularly backed up. So, um, and then sometimes we even find government agencies that are not sending any of their backups off-site at all, leaving them with no disaster recovery. So definitely some challenges and some things that should lead to some good discussions. So now we're going to talk a little bit about best practices, and I'm going to talk to you about left of boom and right of boom, right? So left of boom is that military term that talks about what happens before there's an incident, before there's an attack. And so that's all of your preventative cybersecurity kinds of things. And so the good news is there are a lot of government agencies out there, uh, and they're already implementing cybersecurity best practices. So there are peers out there that you can reach out to. There's the Texas DIR that has resources, and we have a whole list of other resources that can help you. So the bad news is that cybersecurity isn't cheap. It's not just a one-time expense, and it requires time and effort across your organization, from the leadership to IT, all the way down to your end users. Before you can build a cybersecurity program, we always recommend starting with a baseline security assessment to help you understand your organizational risks. You know, what are your most critical assets, so that you can focus your limited cybersecurity budget on those most critical assets. Uh, and then the next step would be to either develop or update policies. And we typically recommend that you use one of the cybersecurity frameworks, such as NIST. There's a few others out there as well. And it's just as important to set a schedule for at least annual reviews of your policies. And then, of course, with the incident response plan, you want to tabletop that incident response plan on an annual basis, so that you know how to do that. And then talking about the cybersecurity basics, I think of this in football parlance as this is your basic blocking and tackling, right? Or if you're like me, a gambler, think of it as table stakes. Every government agency should have these basics. And so the assessment is going to help you get an understanding of your current posture and what your gaps are. Uh, Windows patching, that is a critical thing, as missing patches are going to be an attack vector for cyber criminals. Uh, Centrally managed endpoint protection. I don't use the term antivirus as much anymore because the term antivirus is going away, and so we use the term endpoint protection. And then we'll talk a little bit more about what's referred to as endpoint detection and response, or EDR, which is kind of a next generation of endpoint protection. End user security awareness is obviously a big one. You want to make sure that you can report on that. Having regular phishing simulations, having the ability to monitor the dark web, having the ability to have regular micro trainings for your users. Those kind of things can really help you then understand that. The next thing is that if your firewall is more than 3 years old, there's a pretty good chance that it may be missing some of the more advanced cybersecurity capabilities, such as cloud sandboxing. So there are a lot of things that are happening in the cybersecurity world, and having an old firewall can leave you without that network protection. And then protecting your mobile devices like laptops and tablets, having their storage encrypted so if they are lost or stolen, the data on those devices can't be accessed. And then having a good asset tracking system with detailed reporting can help not only with cybersecurity, but also can help you with your budgeting. And then, of course, we hammer on multi-factor authentication a lot. So, and it's the number one way that you can reduce email attacks. So if you haven't gotten that implemented, we highly recommend it. But we also highly recommend that you not only implement MFA for email, but also have it protect your login to your computers and your cloud applications and remote access. So no matter what you're accessing or where, using that MFA to make that happen. So gives you that area, that protection that even if your credentials are lost or stolen or compromised on the dark web, hackers won't be able to get in. Next up, we're going to talk a little bit about cybersecurity protections, advanced. So before you jump off into advanced cybersecurity protections, we always want to make sure that you've got the basics down. So make sure you're going through all of those things. One of the things that we've found about local government agencies is that most local government agencies don't have 24/7 cybersecurity monitoring. Some of it is due to the lack of the knowledge of the technologies and services that are out there, and a lot of it is due to lack of budget. So the term managed detection and response and security operations center as a service are probably newer terms that you might not have heard a lot of, but those are vendors that can help you with 24/7 cybersecurity monitoring. Next up is the vulnerability management. So think about a vulnerability assessment being as like a one-time assessment of vulnerabilities that you might have in your environment, but vulnerability management would be the ongoing, you know, assessment and remediation of vulnerabilities. That being a constant process instead of something that you do once a year or once every 3 years or those kind of things. So, multi-factor authentication tokens. If you've got users who where you don't provide them with smartphones or mobile devices, using MFA tokens instead of using personally owned smartphones might make more sense, especially if you can avoid having to pay for a reimbursement of their monthly cell phone bill. MFA tokens are relatively inexpensive, and they have a one-time cost, not a recurring cost. And then having a regular penetration test and vulnerability assessments. Uh, we typically recommend that you do have a third party do that, not your own internal IT team or your managed IT provider. Uh, that way you can get that verification that what they're doing is protecting you. So. And then Microsoft 365, we're still seeing customers on legacy versions of Office 365 where they don't have the latest cybersecurity protections from Microsoft. We also see a lot of customers that don't have any monitoring around their Microsoft 365 environments, and then some that don't have backups for Office 365 or Microsoft 365. So, and then ransomware protection is something that's a common inside of most of the EDR solutions that are out there, the endpoint detection and response solutions. All right, and now we're going to talk a little bit about the right of boom, right? So we talked about the left of boom, what you can do to prevent things. Now we've had a boom, we've had an incident. Um, Now we're going to have some controls in place to detect and stop attacks that are in progress. So that's your firewalls. Your firewall might have intrusion prevention capabilities. Your endpoint protection or antivirus might have the ability to stop attacks or even do ransomware rollbacks or other things. But then we're going to talk about, the right of the boom. So that boom, that cybersecurity incident, and that can be an overwhelming experience. It can result in infected servers and PCs. There could be data theft. Your users could be disrupted. There could be extortion. You could have significant network outages that might cause interruption to the services of your local government agency. And these can be some of the darkest days for your organization, and they will require defensive actions that can have a direct impact on your ability to recover essential government functions in an expedited manner. So when there is a boom, you know, we're hoping that we're going to hopefully stop it as soon as possible. And then when we're aware of the boom and we know that it's happened, the first thing we've got to do is make sure we don't panic. We've got to invoke our incident response plan. Uh, if you have cyber insurance, there's probably some kind of incident response services from those carriers. If you're with TML or with a private agency, so make sure you know what those services are before there's an event, if you can. Uh, Obviously, one of the other things you need to do is to make sure that you're isolating the affected systems. So that's PC servers, unplug them from the network, maybe even turn them off. You might need to disconnect your internet service to limit the amount of data that a cyber attacker might steal. As painful as that might be, it's still something that you have to consider. And then get that incident response plan in action. So, and even though the immediate thought is to fix and get systems up and running ASAP after a breach, you've got to slow down and make sure you don't destroy valuable forensic data. So containing the breach, isolated infected systems by removing them from the network, and then getting the some type of a forensics, cyber forensics expert involved to help figure out what happened. So, and then of course, most of us don't have that type of expertise on staff, so we're going to need to hire third-party response experts to help us. And then the next step is to make sure everything's eradicated, make sure that we can safely bring systems back online. We may have to recover data, um, and then we have to monitor for any abnormalities in the environment going forward, right? Because we don't want to leave their access in place. We want to make sure that they're completely blocked out. And then next up, I want to talk a little bit about public safety and CGIS best practices. The CGIS security policy contains very specific IT requirements. I'm just going to discuss some of the highlights. I'm not going to do a deep dive into those kind of things, but I think the first step is to make sure you understand what that policy looks like, and there are standards in there, and those are just the minimums. Uh, One thing that I've heard from Sergeant Gretham and some other public safety experts out there is that think about implementing these standards across your entire organization, not just public safety. And then any third party that has remote access to your network, they should be using MFA. And you should have an audit trail to show who accessed your network and when. That's a key part of being able to prove your CGIS compliance. Users who have access to CGIS must be identified, monitored, and tracked. You should be working through the what we refer to as least privileged access to make sure that we've reduced the risk down as low as possible. You should have access control criteria in place, given on a need to know basis, need to share basis, and provided based on job, location, maybe network address. There could be time restrictions in place. You should have password and screen lock policies enforced that meet CGIS requirements. One way to reduce your cybersecurity risk when it comes to public safety is to think of network segmentation. So segmenting your public safety network from the rest of your city or town. And then the other things are, that you've got to make sure every user who's authorized to use CGIS data, they have to have unique usernames and passwords. MFA must be deployed. And this is preferably with physical tokens. Anyone with CGIS access must undergo security awareness training. We suggest annual training at a minimum to keep your users aware of the latest threats. Third-party contractors, such as organizations like Fulcrum Group, any of those service people, they need to be background checked and fingerprinted on an annual basis. Check your current firewall to see if it meets the CGIS standards of FIPS compliance. Surprisingly, there's many of the firewall players out there don't have FIPS compliance. So laptops, tablets, smartphones that are owned by the local government agency, we recommend whole disk encryption be applied so that if they're lost or stolen, the data on them will not be accessible. And then, of course, the FBI requires that any local government agency that experiences a breach must have an incident response plan in place and notify the FBI of the breach. So a lot to it there. All right, so that's pretty much all of my content. I did want to throw out a special offer. We have our Spot Shield Microsoft 365 cybersecurity report. This is a report that we can run against your Microsoft 365 tenant, and it's a great provides a great treasure trove of information about your environment. And it can provide you with a punch list of things that you can implement to immediately improve your Microsoft 365 cybersecurity posture. And it's a great value at $649. We typically charge $2,500 for that service. So if you're interested, reach out to us after this event and we can get some time on the calendar to discuss. As part of this presentation, I've put together some cybersecurity resources where you can go and get additional information. So feel free to do that. And then now let's jump over to some questions here. So all right, Jeremy, did we have any questions so far?
Yeah, excuse me. Danny had shared that CGIS security awareness is only required biannually, so it does not meet the requirements of the state of Texas annual cybersecurity training. So James O'Brien had jumped in and asked, when will CGIS catch up to testing annually? If anyone had that information, if they could share it.
I don't know that information, but I think the big thing there is if you do it annually for everybody, you're covering both scenarios, right? So I think that would be my my best request or best
Right.
idea there. So
And then Blake just jumped on. This may be a silly question, but what type of failure are we protecting against when backing up Office 365 data? We don't have a 365, so I'm just wondering.
well, there are several scenarios, and we've experienced those with our clients. So let's say a user deletes email either purposely or accidentally. Um, so Microsoft will typically keep that data in your deleted items for 30 days, but once it gets past that, it's gone forever, right? So um, other scenarios would be like if you have SharePoint data and the data is deleted, uh, then who's going to how do you recover it if you don't have a backup of it? So those are just a few of the different scenarios. So but the big thing is that Microsoft does not back up your data. Now the data is redundant, right? They've got multiple data centers. They've got all of these different things. So thanks, Christian and Judy, for attending. I know you guys have everybody's got busy days, so those kind of things. But Blake, did that? Hopefully that answered your question. I can unmute people for where people can chime in if they have questions or anything, or unmute yourself and feel free to jump in with the additional kind of things. All right. Blake said yes. Yeah, James says when training is not required, it becomes a battle to enforce. That is so true. So
Eric was asking about a ratio earlier. I think it might have been on a slide that you'd already moved on from. He says, is that ratio somewhere I can put, somewhere I can use it as best practice? So it might have been
okay.
around number 3 or number 4. We could probably dig into the
Oh, the
presentation.
probably the number of employees per IT person.
Yeah, that was
Gotcha.
it.
Okay.
Yeah. So remind me, and I'll. I don't know that I have a specific uh, number. That's just the number that I've based on hundreds and hundreds of conversations over the last 10 years with the local government agencies. All right.
We're doing
What
excellent
else?
on time. So if we wanted to just go ahead and do the break a little bit early, we could jump into the panel here in about 10 to 12 minutes. Did you
Okay.
want to go that route?
Yeah, let's do that. My
So
lunch just
basically
got here.
everyone we
So
built in, exactly. We built in a quick 10-minute break so that anyone could go ahead and start snacking on lunch, or if you need to jump out for a quick bio break, feel free to do so at this time. And we'll stay on and chat with you guys. But if you wanted to jump out for 5 to 10 minutes, whatever you might need to do, just please jump back on here in about 10 minutes and we'll get the panel discussion started right at about the 12:08 to 12:10 mark.
and then Danny, I'm gonna answer your question in chat about the hybrid. And actually, or I guess we can chat about it as we're having lunch and everything. So, but yes, uh, from an Azure AD and local AD, we do recommend a hybrid at least initially. I always think of the journey to the cloud as just that. It's a journey, right? It's not something you're gonna do all at once. So typically we do a hybrid environment so that you've got local AD for print servers, you got a local AD for authenticating users who are in the office, group policies and those kind of things. But long term, as you get everything moved into the cloud, you can potentially have a single Azure only AD. So hope that answers your question. But we're doing a lot of those projects right now. That's probably a top 3 project for us this year, is doing Azure AD hybrid setups.
And I have an answer for James on the annual sieges thing, on the
Okay.
annual testing. So there's been movement, and it's starting in DoD with CUI marking with controlled unclassified information. So CJI has now been deemed under Department of Defense as CUI. And so as CMMC gets adopted, which is the new regulation for not only security controls, but also practices, the CMMC is going to cover all FAR and DFAR. And so as that starts populating through the federal side, that's when you're going to start seeing things catch up, because it's not only just security controls, but also the practices as well. So I would say probably by the end of 24 is when that's going to catch up.
Nice, good information. Anybody willing to share where they ordered lunch from? Ours is just a local here down the road, but I had to go with the grilled chicken. I'm sure everyone would understand why.
I was not as good as you, Jeremy. I ordered chicken and waffles, so that's probably not going to qualify as being healthy, but it sounded good.
Michael Leo had shared that he got a phone call that said Afghanistan on his cell, and he thought that it may be DoorDash via some remote system. Did we just have a phishing scenario happen on our cybersecurity lunch and learn?
You never know.
Got a really good turnout today. After the panel, we will have an audience Q&A, so feel free to continue to post your questions in chat or hold on to them, and feel free to stay on after. We understand if anyone needs to jump at one, no worries. We're just happy to have you here over the last hour and the upcoming hour. Yeah, David usually does share the presentation slides, and we share a recording as well.
Yeah, we'll have I usually even do like a little recap, like a high level, 3 or 4 slides. Here's the highlights of the event. So if you got somebody who's a city manager or somebody who doesn't have a lot of time, they can just peruse the highlights. And then we'll have the whole presentation and have all the details in it. Then we'll have the recording as well. So anybody who wants to watch the whole thing from beginning to end, because the presentation itself doesn't encompass all of the information. So.
So if you're still with us, we're going to get started here in a couple of minutes with the panel discussion. I just wanted to let you know we hadn't decided to take an extra long break. We're just going to get going here in a little bit.
I can see that Sean is a creature of habit, barbecue again, so good choice. Jersey Mike's, a couple of places, including Sergeant Grudem. Chaps, but that's probably, oh, we got a grilled chicken.
Seems like last year or the year before, the common one was Chipotle.
Right. Well, I think the difference is now there's more places that do DoorDash than it used to be. So. All right, Jeremy, well, let's go.
Yeah, definitely. Steve, if you're on, I'm not sure how we want to handle that. I guess we could mute everyone and then the panelists can unmute themselves.
Sure, I just put a kibosh on my Cobb salad, so I'm raring to go. And I would like to thank our panelists for agreeing to spend a little bit of time with us today. Just as a reminder, I'm Steve Meek. I'm the old school security guy. I don't mind taking the time to explain things because a whole bunch of people took pity on me over time. And Sergeant Grudem, could you wave? Sergeant Grudem, he builds himself as a long-standing cop with IT experience. So organizations, cities need a lot more of that. Then we also have Drew Korn. Can you wave to the audience in TMZ who's outside your window? He's got a lots of responsibility with a little bit of control. So thanks, Drew, for popping on. And then William Burchett, can you also wave there? All right, William. William's I guess a neoclassical soul because he builds himself as a sleepless pigeon chaser. So there's a lot to unpack there that I want to dig into in our conversation. And then last but not least, we also have Ryan Young. Ryan, if you could give the old wave. Oh, nice. That was like Prince or Queen worthy. Yeah, that was nice. So he says he's made a career out of leeching knowledge from people smarter than me. That sounds like all of us. That should be our panel mantra. The ability to research and gather information is so important, and that kind of brings us to our panel and our conversation. One of the big things in cybersecurity that we talk about is making sure that you're getting out there and getting knowledge, and so being at this panel, participating in a panel, a rising tide lifts all boats. I think that's a JFK quote, but by getting together, by sharing, by interacting with other peers, you've got the opportunity to not only improve your security, but for them to improve theirs. So all groups and organizations of people would challenge you that if you're trying to make security better, if you're trying to make things better, this is a good place to start. So let's get a little bit of a free flowing conversation here going. I just kind of wanted to maybe ask some questions. I'm sure most of the organizations here have had security going for a while. So I guess William, just from your point of view, one of the things that's important for security is policies. So what does an organization do to kind of keep the ball rolling on policies?
Sure. I mean, the big thing with policies, I mean, is even starting with CGIS, as we mentioned before, for everybody. The CGIS division has actually in the document says, hey, this could be the only security policy um, for an organization. So, starting there, but going beyond that, policies need to be tailored for the organization. I think the big thing that we see in the industry is templates, and nothing against SANS or some of those, but any templated policy really only covers you at about 80%. It'll cover the cyber basics, but it doesn't actually tailor it to the organization, and understanding the role and the departments. Different departments in different cities do different things. They have the same goals, they just are called something different. So each of those need to be addressed, and the policies will need to be tailored for the organization that they're actually in and being used for. And they need to be clear and concise, and not full of real technical or cyber language, real legal language. It needs to be basic and understandable by anybody.
Yeah, I think sometimes you can over design it and then it makes it hard to maintain. Drew, for yourself, dealing with IT policies, do you have a do you have a thought around keeping up with things, or maybe your challenges?
Well, yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with William. You got to make it your own. We use Fulcrum as our outsourced IT, so it's going to be different from an organization that has IT internal. You're going to have some steps in communication and handoffs, and so yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking that policies they get put on a shelf, and people don't pay much attention. They don't use them. It's up to management to make sure everybody's a buy-in. You talked earlier about social engineering. I mean, anybody in your organization can be that person that got the breach. So everybody has to be aware of the policies.
Sergeant, from the departmental level, or from the public safety level, how are policies taken into your life? How does that affect your job?
Well, William and Drew did a good job covering the the CGIS side of things and the departmental side of things. I think it's important for IT to jump into the onboarding and offboarding of employees, and making sure that they understand that the Internet of Things, or the IoT devices that are being issued to them, including MFA tokens and stuff of that nature, that they understand the responsibility that comes with those things leaving the premise of the city or the organization. In addition to that, maintaining a security gap analysis frequently, so that you can continue building that policy as your departmental or government entity architecture requires.
Ryan, any onboarding, offboarding tips that that from your experiences with multiple organizations that you'd like to share?
document, document, document. It's got to be in writing, and it has to be reviewed regularly with all parties involved. So if you have outsourced IT, then you need to be reviewing those policies as they change, and then document them and make sure that everybody's on the same page, and just have an understanding that it's an evergreen process. It never ends. You're never done with this. There can be world-changing events like COVID that can change policies and procedures, and then there can be technology changes, things moving to the cloud, and so many different possibilities of things that can change the situation and sort of the landscape of what you're dealing with in information technology. So you've got to document it, because it's impossible to remember stuff. It's impossible to verbally communicate this kind of stuff from, say a manager to an employee or something like that. It's got to be something that's written down that you can reference, that's posted where everybody can find it as part of, say an employee handbook or something like that, where everybody knows where it is. And then you have to review it frequently to make sure that it's up to date.
Awesome. And you mentioned 3 things up front. What was the one in the middle?
Document.
Document. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I got it.
Yeah.
I got it. Well, Sergeant, I think you, maybe, being a longstanding cop with IT experience might give you a different take on things. From your cybersecurity approach, what would you say your cybersecurity approach is?
In regard to just organization as a whole?
Your department, the organization, maybe just what you add to the cybersecurity conversation for your organization.
I think it's very important. MFA, mobile device management, just making sure that you have end user control, because our weakest link is the end user. Unfortunately, knowledge is power. And if you can make sure that you have some level of being able to shut down the attack at that spot, then you alleviate a lot of the back end problems.
Gotcha. Drew, what about you? As a in your role, you're not the hands-on technologist. What are you adding to that cybersecurity equation?
Yeah, technically nothing at all. But as from a leadership position, I'm, the buy-in, showing that I'm take it seriously, showing that I'm doing the training as well. We do those annual tests, and I try to shame all my employees that I scored better than them on the tests. So just taking it seriously and making it an important part of the organization.
Security awareness shaming. I like it. I think, if you gamify some of these kinds of things, that sometimes that can be very helpful for your programs, and getting everyone bought into things. Any other tips, William or Ryan, or around just cybersecurity in general, and kind of having that strategy?
Yeah, I'll add, the big thing when you look at a cybersecurity program is the policies are telling you why, and then the documents teaching you, how, right? But ultimately the controls like MFA, the antivirus, the email security, all those controls are the enforcement. So they all have to work hand in hand. So, putting in technology without policies is fruitless, right? It'll give you evidence, but it won't give you the why. And so starting with the policy, followed through with the controls to enforce that policy, that's what brings the entire program together.
That's awesome. I like that. The author, Simon Sinek, talks a lot about, when you're trying to drive change, make sure that you start with why. And I think that you just reinforce that, just deploying MFA, just rolling out policies, people may not understand, but if they understand it more than just, hey, it's a security thing, then they're more likely to buy in. Ryan, any other tips for buying in?
Yeah, just to kind of build in on that, but I would say I can't remember what methodology I first learned this terminology from, but it was that you break things down into 3 buckets. So you got people, process, and technology. And you have to attack all 3 fronts. You've got to have the technology covered. That's the boxes and the wires and the blinky lights to make sure you've got all that stuff in place. You've got to have the processes in place, which help people understand the why in the documentation. And then you've got to educate the people. So unless you have all 3 of those fronts covered, there's vulnerabilities there that you have to be aware of, and you have to mitigate that risk.
Awesome. Now, I'm assuming since my housing taxes keep going up and everything, that every organization is flush with money, and I'm sure cities also have plenty of money. But let's assume for a second that some of you guys might have some budgetary constraints. Drew, how do you navigate the realm of budgetary constraints? Trying to figure out which cybersecurity to embrace versus all the other things that are on your plate for the city to complete in a typical fiscal year.
Well, yeah, it's tough. I mean, there's solutions upon solutions, and there's some very expensive ones. I mean, and you can lock down your system that you don't have any efficiency, and that you're constantly calling IT to get you in or help. So it's a continuous balance. That's why I'm kind of, that's what my takeaway when I said recent trends. I mean, I'm just trying to keep up with my peers in other cities, and what is the saying? You don't have to run faster than a bear. You just have to run faster than the next guy. I mean, I hate to be callous about it, but we have limited resources. You just kind of work your way up. You protect your most valuable information. We don't keep credit card numbers. We have extra protection for Social Security numbers and HR stuff, and you just kind of work your way up. Obviously, our police department's through CGIS. We need to populate that to the rest of the staff, but just a stepwise fashion, triage it. Your most vulnerable areas, make sure you're protected, and then just continue to, as resources become available, just and you always have to look back, because they're the bad guys are always they're always coming up with new ways to get you. So you've got to constantly look back and say, that solution that worked 3 years ago maybe be antiquated, and you've got to reshuffle it. So I don't know. I didn't answer your question, Steve, but it's just with every other budget priority. Everybody wants something. Everybody wants more pay. Everybody wants lower taxes. It's you just gotta work through it all.
Ryan, along the same lines, or is there feedback or advice you give to people as you're trying to coach them through how to deal with the budget constraints they might be experiencing?
Yeah, it's I think you've got to have somebody that you trust, that you can talk to about it, that can help you with those priorities. Like Drew said, I think at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. If the budget won't cover everything, then maybe you look at it as different phases. What's the first priority? What's the thing that needs to be most pressing? And what's the thing that maybe we can wait for, 3 months or 6 months or until the next fiscal year. So you have to get creative. What kind of contracting vehicles are out there, and also what type of grants do we have available to help us cover stuff. So we have all these different sources of revenue that can only be used for specific things. So sometimes it can be a bit of a moving target to buy, hardware equipment versus software, for example. So I think you just have to, as a decision maker, particularly at this level, you have to have somebody in your corner that you can trust to kind of help you through that, which is easy for me to say because I'm that guy. So I hope that doesn't sound too self-serving, but just to sort of prioritize those things to where, have an organization that does have their ear to the ground, that's listening to what are the latest trends, in terms of, endpoint protection, for example, is one that seems to be coming up a lot lately. And to help you, thanks, Steve, to help you figure out what are those priorities, what would they put at the top of the list, what is the relative bang for the buck that you might get for something too. Something could be really expensive, but maybe you could spend a little bit less money and get a better return on the investment. So you just have to navigate those and have really honest conversations, and at the end of the day understand, okay, well, what is the risk level that I'm willing to accept here, and what do we do if something happens, and how do we recover from it?
Sergeant Gradham, William, anything else on I guess decision-making processes or life hacks on how to save money?
Yeah, I've got, so there's partnerships. Schools put in a lot of bond packages and stuff of that nature, getting in on some of the stuff that they're capable of getting done, like fiber loops between buildings. And I know a lot of times city buildings are parked somewhere near a school facility, so the cost is diminished when the majority of the project is already put in place by another entity. Depreciation funds for critical infrastructure, making sure that you're yearly are budgeting for things that are going to be replaced in the 3 to 5 year or 4 to 5 year, even bump it out to 6 if you need to, to get those things upgraded and put into play. And then just making sure that you're ready for that CGIS audit every 3 years. Just it's just my thing. That thing is the most stressful time of my 3-year time.
Well, make sure you get you a bucket of Bluebell next time it comes up, so you can cope with it a little bit. By the way, what's your Bluebell flavor?
That's gonna be a chocolate chip cookie dough.
Chocolate chip cookie. Just don't get in around David Johnson. He's like hooked on ice cream. He'll take all your ice cream right away. I'm more of a peachy peach kind of guy.
Half gallon lasts for 3 days at my place. So
that's if you hide it for 2 days, David.
That's correct.
William, anything else?
Scavenger hunt.
The only thing I'll add is working with service providers. There's always the decision of buy versus managed, and I think that's something to always look at. Is how can we turn a capital expense into an OpEx expense, and bring that in on a per seat or per area. That when you approach it instead of the full buy, right, an annual full buy, to doing it as the service and include other services, that also helps in the budgeting process.
That's great. Kind of piggybacking off of that, maybe as a security practitioner, kind of from your focus, you have to kind of have that as a priority. How do you balance that inverse relationship between security and usability? You're brought in to champion making things better, but that creates some difficult conversations. How do you go through that process?
I think the big thing is knowing your organization, right? Security should be transparent. I mean, yes, there's controls that everyone's going to complain about. No one likes pulling out their phone to put in the 6-digit code, or, fishing in their purse for a MFA token. There is a little bit of inconvenience, but the alternative to that is worse, right? And so, security should be transparent, and to understand why things are in place, the reasons behind it. It's not to hinder or slow down, putting in permits, or to slow down taking payments at courts, or things like that. That these controls are there for a reason. But it's also knowing what controls are adequate for the level of data, and that comes with those gap assessments and control assessments, and figuring out what's priority. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's the data that we're protecting, right? And so, bringing it all together, that's how you make security more transparent, easier to use, and not get in front of users to make them unproductive.
Drew and Michael, since you guys are engaging with people directly, what things do you look for from security practitioners or providers to make sure that your people are still able to work and in the right way? What makes for a good experience?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I my when the squawking mellows out a little bit. I don't have the technical expertise to really understand that, but if it escalates to me, I know there's a problem, and then I talk to Ryan and Fulcrum, and we figure out how to adjust the dial a little bit. But yeah, in the granular level, I'm not really sure. I just I know that if they start coming to my office and, hey, can I talk to you? This is just slowing us down. So that's usually how I find out about it. So it's not a real formal process. It's more of a touch and feel type thing. But yeah, and I was thinking about this too. We have some stories. We have some social engineering, and it wasn't real. The employee was trying to provide a service and try to be responsive, and because they thought it was their boss or me or somebody. So it's so we tell those stories too. Again, not to shame them, but to let them know how easy it is, how easy it happens. And so that helps them understand that little bit of that pain. But like William was saying, that little bit of pain, it's like, take your medicine, because it's going to avoid a much bigger problem.
Yeah, I think that you've got to learn the lessons. There's a saying, there's winning or losing. I like to think it's more there's winning or learning. That everything that happens can be a lesson for you if you take that in and systematize it so the whole organization gets it. But if you just let it happen and then kind of move past it as quickly as possible, then you don't get that chance to learn. Michael, Ryan, any other thoughts about making sure that security and operations are hand in hand or working together?
Well, I've noticed with each department, they do things a little differently. Fire department, they run 24/7. They're not in front of their computers all the time. They're, busy playing Xbox, and all that good stuff. Well, as law enforcement has to drive around all day and pay close attention to what's going on. It's a joke to all you fire guys. But each department has their challenges, and I think as long as you can mitigate most of those challenges, but still have the functionality, change is change. People don't generally like it, and in time they come to just accept it. And if we're able to continue to move forward, then we're in a good place.
And then you mentioned MFA before. Every solution has it's also potentially some problems. In your MFA, what good things came out of it? What bad things came out of it?
So we utilize a USB key. It's like a little USB key, and rather than utilizing tokens or having the push notifications sent to phones for the purposes of quick access, so law enforcement officers, when they're trying to get logged in, they've already been kicked out of the screen after 15 minutes, and they got a hot call. I don't want them going into their phone and wrecking a vehicle. While others in the office prefer to have, if they've been issued a phone, then they prefer to use their phone. But there's options. The Senate Bill 944 is one of those that have kind of put a kink in a lot of those measures, putting a fear in people that their personal phones are going to be taken up for subpoenas and all that kind of stuff, which is a very real concern. So, and also paying for people's bills for, utilizing personal devices at in a work environment. So the token, or the what they call the U2F devices, or have been an easier transition for us.
So in your case, you looked at it as not one solution that exactly the same for everyone, but you kind of tried to be mindful of the uniqueness of the department to make sure that it was adopted.
Correct.
Gotcha. Ryan, as you're talking with people about security implementations or initiatives, what kinds of things, or I guess, what are you asking, or how are you trying to uncover that in those bits of information to help with the design?
Yeah, I think it's kind of important to understand kind of what is the user environment and the culture like at each individual account. Because it is very different, even though, even if they're all just local municipalities here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, the environments, the level of technology, and even the user culture is very different amongst those. So in some cases, you just have to look at, what's going to make the most sense for this particular client, and then you customize it. And some of that is, how much do we actually want to lock down with MFA? Because MFAs are really a broad term. It can do a lot of things. You can, hey, if we just want to lock down the Windows computer login, that's one thing. But if you add, maybe 5 or 6 different web logins for some different web-based software services that you use, and you want to, integrate those with sort of a single sign-on type solution, well, that becomes a very different conversation. So in some cases, depending on the size and the complexity of the solution, and then the environment and the culture, you just have to look at that, and you have to know who your users are and understand what kind of level of support they're going to need. Maybe some people are more tech savvy than others. Some people are really comfortable putting an app on their phone, and other people are not. So you have to find another solution for those folks. And there are different MFA providers out there, and you got to figure out which is the best fit for each individual client to hopefully at the end of the day, it is something that we've talked about it already, that it's not there for convenience. It's there in the name of security, but you try to roll it out in a way that is least inconvenient to the end user to make it as smooth as possible. And then after they do it for a couple of weeks, it just becomes second nature, and you don't even think about it anymore.
Now, Ryan, from David's presentation, he kind of talked a little bit about wetware or people as a primary vulnerability. What advice do you give around that particular topic?
You got to train them, and frequently. I would say once a year is not enough. It checks the box, it keeps you compliant, but you can't do the minimum and expect to be highly educated in cybersecurity, because it changes all the time. It changes by the season. The social attacks and the smishing and that kind of stuff, it varies. Around the holidays, you're getting lots of shipping scams, for example. So you're going to get a lot of those texts saying, hey, this is FedEx. We tried to deliver a package to you today. Click here to reschedule the time. Around Valentine's Day, you're going to get more of the romance stuff. So they're very targeted with that, and they're inventing new ways to do it all the time. So you have to constantly be vigilant with your end users and keep them in tune with what's going on. You have to communicate with them. You have to give them the resources. And again, it's one of those things where, yes, it's time out of their day. They have to log into a portal. They have to take a test. Nobody likes taking tests. So, try to make some of those resources somewhat entertaining. Some of the micro trainings that we do, for example, they've got enough dad jokes in the videos to make it somewhat entertaining and make it worth your time, and somewhat more memorable too when you do it that way. So try to gamify the situation. I think, especially in the age of social media, people are pretty competitive. We like to have the higher score than our neighbor. So yeah, maybe we can do that. What was that? Security or shaming security service, or something we invented earlier, I think, based on Drew's comment. But just trying to use all those things at your disposal to increase the adoption and tailor the solution to that particular client.
Yeah, I mean, the complexity of cyber attacks is so it increases so quickly. Just to tell a quick story, last year, spear phishing has gotten so good. Last year, I got a fax from the Nigerian prince. It wasn't, they knew how old I was, and that they knew the only way that I'd get the message is if they faxed it to me. So, it's just amazing how they come up with that kind of information. William, kind of from your experiences, can you maybe speak a little bit around, maybe just kind of the evolution of attacks and how things are changing, or what you're seeing?
Sure, and I'll go a little different direction than phishing. I mean, so take this little USB drive. This guy right here will pick up Bluetooth from a wireless keyboard from over 40 feet away and through walls. So, now this is the new generation of keyloggers, right? So they don't have to email you a keylogger. They can sit outside your building. Or since the fire guys, since Michael was picking on the fire guys, right? Fire code has these electronic door locks that are forced to fail open so that people don't get locked in a fire. Well, with a device like this, I can take out the badge reader in 2 seconds. So now the doors failed open. So that's full access. And these are cheap and they're available online. I mean, so the attacks have changed so much that you even have to worry about conferences where you get a free USB cable. And this USB cable, I don't know if anyone's seen Kevin Mitnick's demo, but this is an OMG cable, which is one of these new cables you plug into a machine and you've got full exploit. So, as we start talking to things about like disabling USB on a computer, that's a technical control to prevent things like that. Or how about the new person that you've never met, the new employee on the smoking deck? There's a badge cloner. It's that big, bought on Amazon, about $50. So, so the attacks are not only just phishing, they've actually gotten to where they're so easy to do from afar, right? You don't actually have to send someone malware. You don't have to, do any of that. All these attacks can happen from, 30, 40, 50 feet away. And the technology is freely available online.
That's great.
And to add,
Michael? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, to add to that, all of those ports that you have in your wall, having access to those could potentially open up, a small little $30 Raspberry Pi computer, or what is it, Chip 2 or whatever, those little baby computers that have Wi-Fi capability to get you access to the domain. So making sure that those patch panels are disconnected for those public-facing Cat 45 cable connections. But I think somebody else said something in chat earlier in regard to the training of people. It's got to be mandatory. Anytime you give somebody an option, people in government are overtaxed. We wear so many hats. We're too busy. I've heard it all. I've heard all the excuses, and I've given all those excuses myself. Having all the hats that I wear, you can ask Ryan. So I think it's important that they make it mandatory. Maybe if it's you have a shift briefing time, or like in beginning or end of day time period where once a week, you just make sure that they get those micro trainings, and so just to get them done and educated.
Awesome. Well, we're about 10-15 minutes away from Q&A, but I think what I'd like to do is maybe just kind of go around the horn, and we've talked around a lot of different things today, and I guess to our audience, maybe if you had like one message that you wanted to make sure that they took away from this, either something you said or something that somebody else said that was particularly salient, I guess I'm looking for you to just kind of pick that one point, that one takeaway that you want people to take away from the conversation. So Drew, why don't we start with you? What's the one thing that you want people to know or hear from this conversation that they take and apply back at the office?
Yeah, I'm old enough that when I was at the city of Dallas, they were rolling out PCs, and IT was the answer to everything. We were in a strategic planning retreat, and all the other managers would, well, that's IT, that's technology. It could be security, it could be contracting, whatever it was, and that's still happening. I mean, IT is great, but your IT manager, your IT department is not. You just can't put it all on them. They're not solely responsible. Everybody is, and so that's my biggest takeaway is we've all got to, every employee, anybody that's got a device. I mean, even somebody that maybe on a parks crew that knows somebody's middle name or came across some records. I mean, it could be the vulnerability could be anybody. So everybody's got to take it seriously.
Gotcha. So I think what I hear you saying is it's not just an IT responsibility. It's everyone. Everyone has a part in it, and I feel for all the IT.
That's the easy
Yeah.
cop out. You point to Michael and he's IT. We're all IT. We're all using it. Obviously, he and William. They're the technical experts, but the social engineering. It's all of us.
Gotcha. Let's see. Ryan, how about yourself? What's the one thing you want to make sure that everyone takes away from the conversation and uses it back home?
Just to take it seriously. That it is, it is no longer one of those things that it's a just in case or a nice to have. It's now a standard part. I kind of liken it to how technology evolves over the years. For example, cell phone plans you used to pay by the minute, and now it's just unlimited. And texting, you used to have a certain limit. And security is sort of that way, in that as the bar gets raised with the sophistication of the attacks, so too does the response to it and the services that you use and the technology that you have to put in place. So you just need to remember that it's important. You need to prioritize it, make room for it in the budget. It's no longer one of those things that you can sort of sweep under the rug and just pray and hope for the best, because the cost is just too high.
Good stuff. And I see Drew's post in there about you, Ryan. Drew, I don't know if you knew this, but also on the fax to me from the Nigerian Prince, it asked me to walk it over to Ryan since he probably wouldn't be able to make it to the fax machine on his two legs. So just in case you're curious.
I feed off the blood of my customers. That's how I stay young, like a vampire.
Great. Well, Ryan, the only thing I have to say to you about that is what others think about you is none of your business. So don't. Okay, I don't know where I was going with that. Anyways, Michael, for yourself, what's your one takeaway that you want everyone to get from it?
I think we need to remind ourselves that as technology progresses, so do people. I mean, I've got a daughter that's 9 years old that can do things on her iPad that is absolutely shocking. And granted, I'm in control of that, but they're coming up in the ages, and not we're in the city government. People live here, and they're IT professionals, and so the threat isn't just overseas. The threat isn't just in the county. It's here. There's multiple IT professionals. They're teaching certified ethical hacking training, but you gotta believe that those people are being morally targeted with that knowledge, rather than using it for nefarious purposes. So just know that the threat is real, and we just need to be prepared for it.
Yeah, definitely. There's so many different vectors and things, and as much as anything, if you're from what you're saying and what David Johnson was saying earlier, kind of taking a step back, doing that left of boom thing of survey the land, look and see what you've got, make sure you understand what where stuff lies, and what the threats are, and then kind of trying to figure out where to focus. I think as time evolves, things evolve as well. And, we've talked about the cloud, Office 365, those kinds of things. The reason there's more attacks there is because attackers go where the users are. So, naturally, it's a volume business. If you're not where everybody's at, then it's hard to be successful. And, they're going to keep adjusting to our mitigations or different technologies that we use to get by. William, your closing thought. What's your William's big takeaway from William's excellent adventure?
The biggest thing is security is an iterative process. There's nothing ever that's going to be one and done. You all constantly have to reassess. Every time the legislatures meet, there's more than likely some text and language you need to look at. Same with CJIS security policy. Just going to the appendix and looking at the Delta updates between doesn't help. You've got to look at it in context. And then also expanding to, understanding the other factors that go into those things, like for CJIS NIST, all the definitions for CJIS stuff is in NIST. So it's very iterative, and don't ever think that you're done in any area.
Great point. I think former FBI Director Robert Mueller said something like, there's only two types of companies, those that have been hacked and those that will be. And out of that, you've got to be continually evolving what you're doing, and whether it's supply chain risks or looking at all the emerging threats that come out. We've got the Log4Shell and Felina just came out, and I think it was targeting cities. There's so many pressures to kind of keep up with all the things and that we have to be mindful of. But as far as the iterative process, I think you're never going to get everything accomplished, but you got to keep accomplishing things. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but if you didn't plant it 20 years ago, the next best time is today. So, getting started on your initiatives, getting started on that next thing that you need to focus on, and fitting it around all the other stuff that you're working on. In the end, the world just needs a dull moment. We all just need stuff to work and get a break from all the emergencies that whether it's the pandemic or whatever it happens to be. Getting a break from things. So I think at this point, Jeremy, did you want to pick back up and move us into the old Q&A?
Yeah, definitely. And just before that, I wanted to everyone to remember, we're happy to have a no pressure conversation with anyone who needs to have a better or more specific understanding of what can be done to ensure the security of your technology environment. So feel free to reach out to us, even if it means no promise of business, future business for us. And David tells me that we learned something new on every one of these calls. So definitely want to have those with you guys. We're going to go basically immediately into the Q&A session. So if you need to move on, we appreciate you being involved today, and we'll share the recording with you in the coming days. And if you are heading out at this time, thanks again for attending this, and have a safe and successful rest of your 2022. But otherwise, if anyone here that needs more understanding, or feel free to share any kind of questions, unmute yourself and ask a question. But if you wanted to just drop it in chat, let's talk out what might be confusing, or you just want a better understanding. I saw Danny was saying IT is not all knowing of anything with power cord or battery. That was a good one.
I think
that's always the challenge.
I think Steve's right. If William comes out to Melissa, I'm gonna have to ask him to empty his pockets.
He's got are you sure you really want him to do that? There's things in those pockets I wouldn't want to know about.
He's got too many toys.
Well, hey, on the bright side, I am registered with Austin with PSB, so all's good.
Anyone have anything specific they heard today, or wanted to ask one of the panelists anything directly? Not sure if you all mentioned about logging everything in your environment.
Firewall logging.
That's a very good question.
That's a really good one to talk about, with the the fact that there's, by default, most internal IT departments, managed IT providers are not monitoring your environment 24/7, right? So that is typically the purview of a a SOC as a service or a managed detection and response provider, MDR. And so in those cases, you pay extra, and it's a relatively expensive, but basically they capture all of your logs from your firewall, from your Wi-Fi, from your Active Directory, from your Microsoft 365 environment and other systems. And then they capture that, and then they monitor those logs and look for anomalies. They look for different kinds of activity, and they try to correlate things, right? So if they see something over here, do we see something over here? And then they'll pick up the phone and call you. Hey, we see this anomaly. What do we need to do about it? Kind of thing, and try to figure out what those next steps are. So
And
go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, I was going to add, especially around CGIS and accessing CJI, the logging also helps prove intent. If there's any question of why an officer looked someone up, or what was going on, logging is also there for the protection of the municipality, other than a cyber incident, in proving intent. And that's, the one thing that we always look at logs for is, just the pattern, not an anomalous pattern, but patterns for actual use, so that you can go back and prove if you need to as well.
Any follow-up on retention associated with logging? I heard Jose asking about logging everything, but what kind of retention feedback or thoughts do you guys have?
I would say 1 month past your typical required. So if you're required to keep it a year, do it a year plus a month, because you never know if on day 30 you need to go back.
I don't see another question, but what about intrusion response? There was one of the party earlier had mentioned intrusion response. I didn't choose to go down that hole at that time, but what feedback around intrusion response would anyone in the group have?
What about, has anybody had to deal with TML for kind of a incident response?
Well, I know with CGIS, there's a requirement, at the time you start at the very beginning, and then you contact whoever your LASO is, your local agency security officer, and from there they do a quick assessment while contacting the I believe it's the CGA, the central. Sorry about that. The central office, the technical office for CGIS, and they will make a determination at that time if they need to send somebody out to do a forensic analysis. But that's part of the incident response for the police department. As far as the city's concerned, you take out that CGIS part, and you just implement, plug in Fulcrum, or plug in your MSP, or plug in whatever your next step is, TML or whatever forensic team that you have in play.
And I'll just add to that, be sure to have forensic forms on hand. I know as a cyber guy, anytime I go touch a machine, chain of custody is always key.
Yeah, I think you hit a really good one there, Will, is that, getting that forensics expert to engage sooner than later, so that, the chain of custody isn't, broken, or, the evidence lost forever, kind of thing. So Jose had another question about cyber deception for a malicious actor in your environment, like a honeypot. Anybody have any experience around that? Well, you want to chime in on that, what you've seen?
Yeah, I would say you put honeypots everywhere. It can be as simple as a canary file on a machine, that if that file is changed, um, for ransom, let's say it gets encrypted, then that file is now compromised. So that's an early warning sign. Some of your EDR vendors actually do that. They put a hidden text file out there for the canary. But then also logins, having a separate domain, separate logins that are honeypot, simple passwords that can be broken that appear to be a domain admin, but they're not necessarily your actual domain. There's many ways to do it that doesn't cost anything. But then there's also, true honeypot, honeynet systems that you can put in that are, like active sensors tied to your SIM and your SOC service. And so there's any level, but absolutely deception is one of the big things, because hackers will go for the easiest, lowest hanging fruit.
All right, what other questions do we have?
Brian shared earlier about giving MFA options. I think it was partially a joke, but I think it was while Greta was talking. So I think it was, kind of a legitimate question. Do you actually provide options, or do you just force your staff to go the best MFA option for your environment?
Well, there's MFA is such a wide ranging, you have different systems to be protective. You've got different schedules, different types of conditional access that can be allowed, and all of those things. Uh, you know, uh, Obviously, we want to try to be as secure as possible. So
I just didn't remember having a choice.
exactly,
A
Jeremy.
token choice. You're going to do this now. Yes, sir.
So
Well,
in an office setting, that's generally an okay thing, but when you have computers and an engine where you have a 4-man crew accessing one machine, it makes it a lot more difficult for them to utilize that. And then plus they're in all their bunker gear, and all that kind of stuff. Where are they going to hide their phone or their token, that type of thing. Same thing with officers, they're up in and out of the car all day long. And so the environment really does make a difference as to the tool that you use, in my opinion.
Yeah. Do you have city issued cell phones, or do people have personal cell phones? Are you wanting to avoid, reimbursing people for the cost of their monthly cost of their cell phones, right? That's, 60, $80 a month or whatever versus the, $75 one-time cost for a token possibly. So different things that go into the conversation for sure. So.
And, tokens are IPS certified as well. So there's the secure CJIS security side of that.
That's correct.
The one thing you need to factor into that is somebody has to manage where those are and who has them and check them in and out. That's people just forget about it. Somebody has to be responsible for knowing where they're at.
Yeah, I think Sergeant Greta mentioned that's kind of the HR part of the HR process all the way, from IT and HR working together on those things. New user setups and then user terminations, and that's got to be part of those checklists. I think Will is possible, or Wes is being possibly, yeah, a little bit.
He used the sarcasm
facetious.
font, I noticed.
That's right.
Yes. Nobody ever loses anything. So. All right. Any other questions? We talked about a lot of stuff today, so.
If there's anything you wanted to share about content that we could maybe address next time, feel free to put that in chat as well.
Yeah, we're always wanting to learn more for sure. So.
Really good presentation, Jeremy, guys. Thank you.
Jeremy did the presentation.
Well,
You're welcome.
he's
You're
he
welcome.
said he's and Steve. I forget about Steve all the time, even though he's my boss. Anyway,
Jeremy always takes credit.
Yes.
He's like anonymous. No matter what's going on in the world, Jeremy's taking credit for it.
He's probably the guy that ate the rest of my ice cream, I bet.
Where's your Guy Fawkes mask?
Yeah. All right. Well, we got to get out of here so that everybody can get back to work. Thanks, everybody. Jeremy, any final comments?
That was it. Just like I said, if there's any need for specific understanding and how to address it with what you guys are working with, just feel free to reach out to us and we'll have that chat.
All right. Awesome. Well, thanks, everybody. I'll have this information shared out, recap of everything within the next couple of days. Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you.
Thanks
you.
all.